Hi, Misha here, and as you know, recently we took out my Colt M45A1, and since we were packing 45 ACP that day, and since Fox complains about guns being too small for his big mitts, I kind of half as a joke put the crew serve pistol in the range bag, the HK Mark 23 or MK23 motto for military parlance, the SOCOM pistol. This is about as big as it gets in a lot of ways. So thought we'd see, what he thought about it and just kind of do a retrospective. This is actually a gun I considered parting with during the whole thing 2020, 2021, but I didn't because I couldn't actually find the box. And so it's still here, and to be honest, I'm kind of glad it is because it's bizarrely charming. But with that, we'll just dive on in as usual. If you could, please do like, share, and subscribe. And help support us. Check out Patreon. Let's get into it. The Mark 23 story really is the story of SOCOM itself, or at least its beginnings. It was a product of lessons learned from Vietnam, plus some additional things from Grenada and other activities in the 80s. SOCOM was formed. In 1989, it started to consolidate and standardize weapons, including handguns. Of course, the standard branches had recently adopted the Beretta. There were plenty of 1911s, and there would be some SIG 226s and 228s, known as the Mark 25 eventually, and the M11. Several handguns and some older revolvers. And so specifications were laid out for an offensive handgun system. The idea, it would not act as a backup gun, at least it didn't have to. It could be a primary weapon or kind of a secondary primary weapon, something that could be used behind enemy lines. And they considered what it should fire. 9mm wasn't really enough. The, at the time, very new 10mm was too much. And so 45 ACP was looked upon. However, the 1911, even a reworked and updated version, just would not have the performance and reliability that was needed. And they wanted to go ahead and bump 45 up to what would be called 45 plus P, 185 grain projectile, traveling hotter and faster to try to get a little more out, kind of bridging the gap. And thus a program was announced, and many companies submitted concepts, but by 1991 it was just down to two: Colt and Heckler and Koch. Mark 23. You know, it still works in range. The requirements for the new SOCOM pistol were quite difficult, if not nigh on impossible. It needed to fire both the 45 plus P as well as standard 45 ammunition, hold at least 10 rounds. It had weight and length requirements, although they weren't that serious. There were all kinds of other things, double, single action, decocker, what have you. But mostly it had to do with accuracy and endurance. Very high standards there. And that's ultimately why HK would win. It really wasn't even any contest. The Colt entry just could not catch up. It was too much based on the 1911, with some features like a rotating barrel that were not conducive to what this weapon also needed: a suppressor. In fact, the Mark 23 wasn't a single pistol, it was a weapons system. I haven't bothered to pick up a suppressor for this yet. Maybe one day I will, but I've had this fake suppressor / extension just for the look of it for a long time. Originally, Heckler and Koch would make their own suppressor during trials, but very quickly it would go over to one made for the Mark 23 specifically by Knight's Armament, although they were initially making it for the Colt entry. And down here there would be the LAM, laser aiming module, which would produce visible and night infrared versions of a laser and a light, a white light. And it would shrink throughout, the size-wise would shrink throughout the competition because technology was progressing. At this point, we're into 1993. We're entering in phase 2. We'll go into phase 3. And in 1995, after a few extra revisions to the gun, Heckler & Koch would be awarded the contract. And these pistols would all be built, just like the civilian version, in Germany for SOCOM, and deliveries would begin in May of 1996. Roughly 2,000 pistols were ordered, plus some that had already been sent for trials, and small numbers were delivered later on as kind of attrition replacements. But 2,000 is a good, very rough approximation number of this gun. So control-wise, we have quite tall sights, drift adjustable, that's to work with the suppressor, of course, threaded barrel, metal slide, polymer frame, not the first polymer by far, in fact that would be the VP70, but still quite early. We have a proprietary rail. That's not a bad thing, and that's just what they were in the 90s. We have a double single action trigger. The trigger is quite wide and ribbed for your pleasure. It's metal. The hammer is metal, but it's coated, and I like it. It's not too big, not too small. It's pretty standard control-wise, conventional slide stop, quite large, easy to hit. What's not so easy to hit is this decocker. It's quite flush, and when you hit it, it springs up with a lot of authority. But the idea was they didn't want it to be accidentally hit, so yeah. Now your safety cannot go on unless your hammer's back, so 1911 style. Thankfully, it does not have a grip safety though. And speaking of the grip, this gun is large, but this grip is just small enough that people like me with smaller hands can still use it. The hammer spring, the mainspring, is exposed back here. There's no unnecessary finger grooves up here. It doesn't flare out a whole bunch in the back, just enough for the lanyard hook. And so it's just small enough that for single action, no problem. The double's a little long for me, but realistically, you're mostly going to be using this in single. I do like the magazines. They're metal. They only hold 12 rounds. Today that seems small. Back then that was fine. Of course, during the ban, these came with 10, but this is a 2014 dated gun, so it came with 2 standard 12-round mags. Again, it's bizarrely comfortable, but it's very much a product of its time. And it disassembles much like a 1911, but just a little bit easier, a little bit more simplified. So let's take a look inside and see what makes this thing so damn durable. So big, chunky slide stop takedown pin. You can hear how heavy it is. Pretty standard slide. Most of your weight in the slides back here for your trigger mechanism. Bag. And then, I think I said slide frame. Anyway, it's been a long day. Everything's in our slide here, though, really, that makes this so darn durable. I mean, check out this spring. It's captive and big. To take this off, you'll need to unscrew this cap. Fun fact, while mine came with the thread protector, I've talked to the people that bought Mark 23s, and theirs did not. When you go to pop this out, it's pretty standard, except there's a bit of resistance because there is a rubber O-ring up here. Water protection and a little bit of accuracy. And our slide is pretty standard, guys, but definitely built up. They would definitely go more reasonable with things when they did the USP, but hey, the U.S. military government had the durability and all that requirements, and to get what they needed, this is what HK had to do, and that's okay. You give the customer what they order. I'm sure the barrel is extreme HK quality. When you get these, they actually give you spare O-rings. So that's one of the few parts that you might consider a wear part on this gun, the O-ring. Unfortunately, the threads are more or less proprietary to this gun. But, I mean, it's HK. Does that really surprise you? They're like Sony in the gun world. And that's about it, guys. Well, let's move right along and wrap things up. We joke about this gun's overall size and weight, but it's not as bad as it might seem. You know, looking at 1911s, they're well over 2 pounds, some of them 2.5. This gun by itself, no suppressor, unloaded, is only about 2 pounds and 4 or 5 ounces. But once you put a suppressor and the lamb on and load it up, it's easily a 5-pound plus gun. The same thing kind of goes for length. The barrel is 5.9 inches, so noticeably longer than 1911s and others. But the overall length without a suppressor is it's not too bad. It's a little over 9.5 inches, whereas most 1911s are about 8.25 to 8.5, depending. So it's longer than a 1911, but not as much as you might originally think. Of course, once you throw a suppressor on, that stretches the overall length to about 16.5 inches. Originally, they wanted it to be about 16 inches, but they had to kind of concede to just the realities of suppressor design, and to get some other features they wanted, they had to let it go a little bit longer. So it really is quite long, but, you know, it looks maybe a little bulkier than it really is. Well, that said, I've shot it. Let's hand it over to Fox now. Mark 23. So these were delivered quite quickly. It helped HK that they were already looking to make civilian and police guns, and so they kind of took from that research to make the Mark 23. They would also introduce a civilian version quite quickly after delivering the military, and they're very similar. The markings are a little different. Some civilian guns have more of a matte finish to the slide. Others are more shiny. This is a phosphate undercoat with a baked-on lacquer paint topcoat. The barrel, of course, is cold hammer forged, chrome lined with polygonal rifling, very HK, and the polymer frame is metal reinforced where necessary, although maybe not as much as you would think. Some guns like the IMI, IWI Jericho, and the polymer version seem to have a little beefier, but that's not the point. The slide's really where the robustness comes from here, and it really was robust. In testing, it would go between 6 and even up to 15,000 rounds before a failure, major parts breakage, and at least 3 of these survived 30,000 round endurance tests. Yeah, they really, really did well. But once I started handing them to SOCOM operators, the response, I'm sure some people loved them, but the response was often, "What the shit do you want us to do with this?" Outside of some very specific situations and missions, a very large 45 intended to more or less run with a suppressor, and with quickly getting dated electronics underneath. I'm not saying it was it did its job. HK delivered exactly what was ordered. Just turns out there maybe not have been the need as much. Plus the M45 plus P ammo, the 185 grain, it was never available in very large quantities. So the Mark 23's future was very much in doubt, at least 1999, 2000. But of course in 2001 the War on Terror began.
Mark 23.
The War on Terror would give this a bit of a second lease in life, and it would see some issuance, some special operations missions, but even then it was limited. Newer guns were coming online. Not only were newer models of the Beretta available, the new model of the Mark 25, the SIG 226 was around, and the Glock 19 started being used by Special Forces more and more frequently. This is kind of telling because there are no large purchase orders for more Mark 23 Modos for the military. However, in the civilian market, well, this was a pretty decent seller because, well, it is a military-style pistol. People like military guns. During the assault weapons ban, the only real compromise you had to make when getting it was having a 10-round mag versus 12. And it is extremely durable and dependable. And it's also very accurate. It's considered match grade quality. It's able producing a 2-inch group at 25 yards, which is really quite good for a 45 pistol. And I'm sure some examples do even better. So let's let Fox shoot it one more time and get his opinion, and then we'll have some final thoughts. Mark 23 in the rain.
Beautiful.
What'd you think?
Dude, I love this gun. The recoil on it was so minimal. The trigger pull was awesome. The reset was even better. I think everything about this gun. This grip is a little thick. I'm gonna shoot it next time with gloves on, because this front grip right here is a little rough on the front of your hands there. Check out that. Yeah, I do like it.
Today, the Mark 23 is still in inventory, but I have to wonder how many get checked out. It's a bit of a curiosity. Maybe even a bit of a dinosaur. But that's okay. We can still enjoy it. And it is still interesting to look at what the young SOCOM thought they would need in the late 80s and early 90s, because this is it. This is what they thought would be useful. The reality, well, as often happens, it ended up being quite different. Plus, you have new generations coming in, and warfare is always changing. And so, new needs, new things, and we have new Special Forces pistols and even a new standard service gun these days. But it's always fun to revisit some of the classics. And of course, this did spawn the USP series and the newer HK45 series. And even one of those, the HK45 CT, has been adopted as the Mark 24. So in some ways, that's been more of a success than its very much bigger, longer, older brother. Since he's been firing other 45s, he thought he would break out his old Glock 21.
It's hard to beat it.
Well, I'm glad that Fox really did enjoy shooting it. It is a fun gun, and I am kind of glad I didn't get rid of it. It's unique in the world of firearms when so many things are just copies of other things. No one's going to mistake an HK Mark 23. Was it a success for the military? No, not really. But did HK deliver exactly what Special Forces Command ordered, wanted? Yes, they did. I just don't think they realized just how big it was going to be, especially with the attached suppressor and module under here. It's definitely an offensive pistol. Not a whole lot smaller or lighter than a submachine gun, but interesting try. I don't think they really understood what operators needed at the time. We saw the same kind of thing with the with the M45A1, frankly. But yeah, just thought we'd revisit it. Why not? It was a lot of fun. It definitely worked in the rain. Got to rain test it, so that was kind of cool. Nice durable finish on these. I have no doubt this will probably outlive me and Fox both. But if you want a Mark 23, tell us in the comments why you're crazy like I am and have one, because there's probably no practical reason. It's a different reason we do. If you could, please do like, share, and subscribe. And if you'd like to help support the channel, please check out the link to the Patreon page. This is Misha, and we'll catch you very soon next time.